So the application process, I'll go briefly over that as well. This process is pretty much the same whether you are the owner of an E-1 business or you have employees that you want to bring into the United States to help manage or to provide services to your business. So the first thing, of course, is documentation. The requirement is that you have, of course, your passport to prove that you are a citizen of one of the treaty countries. There's very specific visa application forms that I have listed here. And then very much importantly, you need to prove the substantial trade between your business outside the U.S. and to the U.S. The procedures are typically we suggest that you apply at the U.S. Embassy in your home country. So again, if you're in Canada, you would need to apply to the U.S. Embassy in Canada, usually in Toronto, and provide all of the documentation and requirements. Each embassy or consulate has its own procedure. I'm providing here just sort of the basics of what's typically required, but each embassy usually has their own list of what they're looking for, what information they would like, and information about how long their process will take. But in general, or relatively, the E2 visa or the E1 visa is a relatively quick process compared to other immigration processes. So it can take as little as a couple of weeks to a few months in order to get the visa processed and hopefully approved. When you do get an E1 visa, usually it's issued for 5 years, and your company, it's very specific to your company. So your company will be registered as an E1 company, and that visa will be issued to you specifically for 5 years with a designation as to what company is the sponsor or the trading company for you. 5 years, but then it can be renewed. So you can renew, as I mentioned before, you can renew or maintain E1 status indefinitely forever if you wish. But you will have to go through that process every 5 years. Now, there is a distinction between a visa being issued for 5 years. So a visa in your passport, or what we call the visa stamp in your passport, is kind of like a ticket to come into the country. So once you come into the country, the I-94 is what determines how long you can stay in the country. So typically for e-visas, when you come into the country, you will get an I-94 that is good for 2 years. So you must be careful to be sure that you do not overstay that 2 years, that either you leave and come back again, even if it's for a day, you go out and you come back in and you get another 2 years, or you file a change of status in the U.S. or an extension of status where you're asking your I-94 stay to be extended for another 2 years. For most people, it's a better option to just travel out and come back in. It's much easier and less paperwork to do that. But if travel is not an option, then you can actually request the government, Department of Homeland Security, to extend your stay by filing a specific petition called an I-129 petition.